Good morning everyone. In this video I'm going to analyze the live price action for EU and DXY. You're going to see my technical analysis and my strategy, so if you want to see those then stick around. Let's begin here on the daily. For those that are completely new, this bottom section here is DXY and the top here is EU. So I have them on the screen so we can remain focused, see the opportunities without flicking backwards and forwards when we are analyzing that. Looking at the current daily chart, what story is it telling us? Previous day, price was attempted to be very bullish, right? You can see price reached really high and ended up being pushed down and closing out as this long leg doji, kind of like a high test. On DXY, of course, it was the same, right? Price reached down deep into this daily order block and was pushed back and actually ended up closing bullish. So we have our previous daily high, previous daily low on both. Those are still currently intact as points of buy side and sell side liquidity. That's the only thing really we can gain from this chart at the moment, is just that, we seem to have taken some buy side liquidity clearly on EU, which made it push back down and close out near the open. We'll go into the 4 hour now and it will paint a better picture as to why. Now on the 4 hour, what we see is that, of course, price pulled back bullish, making high lows, high highs, back to this previous premium, this old 4 hour fair value gap and order block. So now we came into the order block and clearly we rejected that. We closed out as a high test and then was bearish for the rest of the day. On DXY, price didn't quite make it to that order block down here. Price is a bit unsynced with EU at this moment in how far obviously it's reached on the 4 hour time frame. We did, however, go into about 50% of the fair value gap and reject while this rejected the order block. Right, so we finished the day bullish on EU. So that pulled us back down to the discount of this current leg here. This current bullish leg, we rejected this high and we pushed down bearish into a discount, and vice versa on DXY, we pulled back up into a premium. So of course, price is yet to break the low here. This note here is a weak high if the low holds. Currently, we're holding price here. So if price were to continue bullish, the story would say that we're going to take this high and probably ultimately this high, because this low would be strong and this would be weak. That would go along with my notes down here. We have our unmitigated higher time frame POI with more downside available. Therefore, DXY reaching to fill this gap would go along with this low holding and EU ultimately going to take this high and the buy side liquidity here. That may not happen today, but that's the narrative we can gain from the 4 hour. Of course, in the most immediate, we have this 4 hour fair value gap, which could hold price and send it lower. But we'll look at that on the lower time frames. But if that were to happen, you can see we still have this fair value gap here that's not fully filled. And of course, on DXY, we have the same opposing gap here, which didn't get filled. We only partially mitigated that, took that sell side liquidity here, you can see, and made that new bullish run. Price may eventually come and fill this. We don't know when, but those are things for us to be aware of. On the 1 hour now, right, just to show this leg even more clearer, you can see we had this bullish 1 hour leg. We've pulled back down into this discount area. Now for me, of course, there's no obvious turning point here. Like there's no order block or fair value gap that I can see that it's filled here on the higher time frame for it to continue going higher from, but price may do that. Price may come down, just sweep this previous daily low and continue that way, or even sweep this low, fill this gap and continue that way. But those are just scenarios, right? Price, there doesn't have to be anything here for it to go. It could have just taken the sell side liquidity from these previous lows and keep going. But I just thought I'd mention that. So at this moment in time, we are being held by, like I said on the 4 hour, there's a 4 hour fair value gap here, and there's also a 1 hour fair value gap. Same on DXY. Price is currently within that fair value gap. I'll show you on a lower time frame, this X here, but we have swept the buy side liquidity of Asia highs. which may cause price to continue bearish and obviously hold this fair value gap. However, because there is remaining fair value gap above, we don't know if price is going to continue higher and fill that before going lower. Of course, and the same situation for DXY, we may still fill that, but we may also go higher here now and continue for this 4-hour fair value gap and go lower here now for this remaining sell side liquidity and fair value gap. So that's a valid scenario. So let's go down to the M15 and I'll draw out the scenarios that if they present themselves would be a valid trade. So zooming into the M15 now, what's happened so far today is you can see now during Frankfurt, we have, well, Frankfurt and into London Open, we have pulled up overnight, created this sell side liquidity like trend line. The Asia range was created here now. Price went up and swept that high just barely. We'd prefer a bigger sweep, obviously. However, on DXY, also we swept that sell side liquidity. So we have buy side and sell side Asia liquidity on DXY and EU swept. We are having a bearish reaction from that. If we draw it out on the M15 here, but it's same valid for the M5, what I would like to see for shorts from here is for, of course, price is going to continue lower after this sweep, create a break of structure on whichever time frame we're using. So in this case, say the M15, pull back to the lower time frame POI here, and then we'd aim to go to the previous daily low, or if you wanted to push it, this next previous low here for the sell side liquidity, which would also be drawn in by the high time frame fair value gap that's below it, right? And that would be DXY breaking its high here, pulling back and moving upwards towards its previous daily high. What would be great in this scenario is if price was to pull back up here, take Frankfurt's high as well. That would be a valid scenario for the same thing. That would be great. Then we get that break again, pull back, slow corrective pullback, and then price and aim down to go lower or to the PDL, as I mentioned. Of course, one thing to mention again is that price may want to fill this fair value gap, right? So you may need to see this same scenario, but higher if we're looking for those sells once that fair value gap is satisfied, and it should be the same thing. You would want the same thing just to trade it lower, right? Something like this, right? You want to pull back, you want to break a structure, you want that little inducement there, and then you'd want price to make this corrective pullback up to a POI, and then we would aim to trade to the previous daily low or wherever meets your requirement. For the buy scenario, of course, there would be two, I would say. So overall, we're probably going to have 3 scenarios here. The immediate one would be, if price just has some volatility here, breaks higher, fills this gap is the danger, of course, of that once we fill this fair value gap. But if price were to still come back down corrective, we could have that potential opportunity to go and trade higher, right? That, of course, would still align with DXY heading for its previous daily low. We'd be heading for our previous daily high, and also there's more the downside available, as I said, because we have that higher time frame fair value gap to bring the price lower on DXY. Of course, there's just an immediate negative here. I would prefer if this buy scenario came from price sweeping Asia low, breaking above the high, creating some sort of inducement there, right? Pulling back to our POI, whichever created that move, and then trading it higher. So that would be that buy scenario. Of course, that may not happen from here because this is a good sell side liquidity point. This same scenario I would apply also to the previous daily low, right? So if we come and take this sell side liquidity here, break higher with volatility, because what I'm waiting for is volatility from the liquidity sweep, right? Because that shows that it's some meaningful liquidity. So we'd have this previous daily low. If it causes volatility, we'd then pull back, and then we can go and aim higher. And then the same, of course, this trade could apply down here if we were to take that and take this sell side liquidity. So those are the scenarios I'm looking for. My favorite scenario at this time, because of this nice trend line, because we're in a fair value gap, so it's a higher time frame confluence, would probably just be for this high here to get swept, or this volatility to continue and we pull back for the shorts. But we're ready for all three scenarios. We know what we want to see ahead of time. So I hope you got value from that. And if there's anything that you want me to clarify or explain that I missed in the comments, then let me know. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.